The T had formed a thin skin across the surface. Commander Aisha Rahman stared at it for a long moment, not because it was interesting, but because nothing else aboard Sentinel Array 9 ever was. The cup floated gently beside her console, caught in the lazy drift of artificial gravity that was just a fraction too weak to feel natural. Even after 18 months, her body had never fully adjusted. Nothing on the station ever fully adjusted. Outside the observation dome, space stretched in endless, indifferent silence. The array sat beyond the outer debris halo, far enough from the sun that Sol looked less like the center of a planetary system and more like just another star among billions. A hard white cold, distant, unremarkable. Most people on Earth had never heard of Sentinel Array 9. Those who had assumed it was some kind of research platform, a quiet scientific outpost studying deep space phenomena. That was the official explanation. It was technically true, which made it a perfect lie. Aisha lifted the tea pouch from the cup and squeezed it between two fingers. The liquid inside had gone lukewarm hours ago. She drank it anyway. It tasted faintly metallic, recycled water filtered 1,000 times through machines that hummed day and night behind the walls. Everything aboard the station tasted like that eventually. Even sleep. She set the cup back into its magnetic cradle and turned her attention to the display. Numbers. Always numbers. Gravitational drift vectors. Long-range radiation flux. Neutrino scatter. Deep spectrum electromagnetic noise from stars that had died before humanity had discovered fire. Data slid across the screen in neat columns and scrolling graphs, the language of a universe that did not care whether anyone was listening. For 18 months, the numbers had behaved perfectly. Perfectly boring. Sentinel Array 9 had a crew of 11. 11 men and women stationed at the furthest edge of human presence, tasked with monitoring a volume of space so vast that even the word empty felt inadequate. They rotated shifts, ran diagnostics, logged reports, exercised, slept, repeated. Day after day. Month after month. Humanity's most remote assignment. Humanity's most tedious job. Officially, they were here to detect anomalies. Unofficially, they were here because 87 years ago, something had entered the solar system without warning, and nobody intended to let that happen again. Aisha leaned back in her chair, the restraint webbing creaking softly. Across the operations deck, Lieutenant Chen was humming under his breath while recalibrating a sensor subroutine. Ensign Morales was reading a novel projected inside her visor, eyes flicking as lines of text scrolled invisibly across her retinas. Somewhere down the corridor, someone laughed at something that was probably not funny. Routine. Predictable. Aisha exhaled slowly. Then the numbers changed. At first, it was subtle. A minor deviation in the gravitational drift column, small enough that most systems would have flagged it as noise. The array's algorithms did flag it, a faint amber flicker in the corner of her display. Aisha frowned. She leaned forward. Gravitational shear variance, plus 0.003%. Tiny. Insignificant. Except it wasn't supposed to be there. She tapped the screen, isolating the reading. Chin. The lieutenant looked up immediately. Boredom vanished from his face with practiced efficiency. Ma'am? I'm getting drift irregularities on Sector Theta 7. Check your side. Chen's fingers moved across his console. His display mirrored hers a second later. He stopped humming. He hesitated. That's odd. Odd was never a good word out here. Aisha reran the scan manually. The array's sensors pulsed outward, mapping curvature distortions across millions of kilometers. The deviation remained. Worse, it had grown. Plus 0.012%. Now the alert indicator brightened. Morales lowered her visor. What's happening? Probably nothing, Chen said automatically. The numbers climbed again. Plus 0.089%. Aisha's pulse quickened. Gravitational distortions did not spike like that without cause. Mass bent space. Space did not bend itself for entertainment. She expanded the detection radius. The display was updated. Aisha's breath caught. The distortion was no longer a point. It was a pattern. multiple signatures emerging along the outer vector, each one small, but collectively forming a structure that made her stomach tighten with cold, instinctive dread. Objects. Many objects. How many contacts? Morales asked, voice suddenly tight. Stand by, Aisha said. The array's tracking systems engaged, resolving noise into form. 10 signatures. 30. 100. The numbers accelerated. Chen's eyes widened. That can't be right. Run verification, Aisha snapped. I already did. The display flooded. Hundreds of mass signatures, then thousands, cascading into existence at the edge of detection like stars igniting all at once in a region of space that had been empty for decades. The system counter spun upward. 1,400. 2,900. 4,000. Aisha felt the blood drain from her face. The contacts were not random. They were arranged. Formation geometry stabilized across her screen with horrifying clarity, layered clusters, structured vectors, precise spacing measured not in chaos, but in intent. Natural bodies did not do this. Asteroids did not arrive in disciplined alignment. Comets did not emerge simultaneously across multiple coordinates. And nothing, absolutely nothing, simply appeared like this. Velocity? She asked. Chen swallowed. High. Very high. Direction? Inward. Silence fell across the operations deck. Every console, every pair of eyes, every heartbeat aboard Sentinel Array 9 locked onto the same impossible truth. Thousands of unidentified objects had just entered the solar system. Together, moving fast, moving with purpose, moving toward the inner worlds, toward Mars, toward Earth. Aisha's training took over before fear fully could. She tore the protective cover off the emergency transmission switch. The plastic snapped under her hand. Solar Command, this is Sentinel Array 9, she said, voice steady only because years of discipline forced it to be. Priority Omega. I repeat, Priority Omega. The room seemed to shrink around her. I am detecting multiple thousand unidentified mass signatures entering the solar system along the outer vector Theta 7. Contacts are in coordinated formation. This is not a sensor error. She glanced at the counter. 4,213. Still climbing. This is not a drill. She hit the transmitter. Across unimaginable distances, the signal leapt from relay to relay, tight beam bursts bouncing through hidden communication nodes scattered across the outer system. What would once have taken hours now required seconds. Behind her, Chen whispered a single word. My God. Aisha did not respond. She was staring at the display, at thousands of cold, silent objects advancing through the darkness between stars. And for the first time in 18 months of perfect, crushing boredom, Commander Aisha Rahman understood something with absolute certainty. The waiting was over. Fleet Admiral Marcus Vale was halfway through a late lunch when his terminal began to scream. The sound was sharp, metallic, utterly at odds with the quiet order of his Geneva office. Vale did not flinch. 42 years in uniform had conditioned certain reactions out of him. Surprise. Startle. He set his fork down with deliberate care. Across the polished surface of his desk, the terminal pulsed crimson. Priority Omega. Vale's jaw tightened. No simulation ever used Omega. He wiped his hands on a linen napkin, leaned forward, and opened the transmission. Sentinel Array 9. Outer Vector Theta 7. Multiple thousand unidentified mass signatures. Coordinated formation. Not a drill. Vale read the message once. Then again. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes hardened into cold, mechanical focus. He tapped a single icon on the side of the terminal. War Room, he said. The connection opened instantly. This is Vale. Activate Protocol Aegis. All phases. The pause. Confirm Omega authorization. Another pause, shorter, tighter. Confirmed, Admiral. Vale ended the call. For a moment, the office was silent again. Outside the tall windows, Geneva moved through an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Traffic flowed. Pedestrians crossed streets. Clouds drifted lazily over the distant Alps. Somewhere, a child laughed. Vale stood. By the time he reached the subterranean command complex beneath the United Nations Defense Directorate, the world had already begun to change. The war room was filling fast. Massive holographic projectors dominated the circular chamber, rendering the solar system in cold, luminous precision. Sol burned at the center. Planetary orbits traced elegant arcs through space. Data layers flickered and updated in real time. And beyond the orbit of Neptune, thousands of red points clustered along the outer vector. Moving inward, Vale entered without ceremony. Every conversation stopped. Admirals, generals, analysts, intelligence officers, decades of experience condensed into human form, turned toward him. Commander Sophia Idris stepped forward. She was tall, razor-focused, her uniform immaculate despite clearly having arrived at speed. Vale had recruited her personally 5 years earlier. She possessed the rarest trait in strategic command. She was never impressed. Status, Vale said. Idris gestured toward the projection. Sentinel Array 9 confirms initial contact. Current count, approximately 4,200 mass signatures. The number hung in the air like a weight. Formation analysis? Structured. Layered. Consistent with known Dominion invasion geometries. A murmur rippled through the room. Vale did not react. Confidence level? Idris met his gaze directly. 98%. Vale nodded once. No drama. No hesitation. Identification. Idris hesitated, not from uncertainty, but from the gravity of the word she was about to say. The Karen Dominion. Silence fell. Not the uneasy silence of confusion. The heavy silence of recognition. Every senior officer in that chamber knew the name. Even if most of humanity did not. 79 years earlier, an alien vessel had crashed into the far side of the moon. It had not been an invasion. It had been a wreck. Inside were survivors, frail, injured, dying members of a species humanity would later designate the Illyrians. Refugees. The last remnants of a civilization erased. Over 6 desperate years, they had told humanity everything they could before their biology finally failed them. They spoke of an empire. Ancient. Relentless. The Karen Dominion did not negotiate. It is categorized. Species were evaluated, assessed for utility, and processed according to a brutally simple doctrine. Comply, integrate, serve. Resist, eliminate, replace. The Illyrians' final warning had been chilling in its certainty. They always come. Not out of malice. Out of inevitability. Back in the war room, the projection zoomed inward. 4,200 red points gliding through darkness. Perfect formation. Perfect confidence. They're earlier than projected, someone whispered. Vale clasped his hands behind his back. Earlier or later nothing changes, he said calmly. Eyes turned toward him. He looked at the fleet markers. Then at Idris. Public disclosure status? Emergency channels are live. Civil authorities initiating staged information release. Vale nodded. For 80 years, humanity had walked a narrow line between truth and panic. The existence of extraterrestrial life had long since been acknowledged. The scale of the threat had not. Fleet readiness? Idris pulled up another data layer. The outer defense network is activating now. All stealth platforms responded. Swarm packages awaiting engagement window. Vale studied the numbers. Everything was moving exactly as designed. Exactly as rehearsed. Exactly as feared. What do we know about their commander? Vale asked. Idris flicked her fingers. A new image materialized above the projection. A towering figure. Four-limbed. Armored in something that looked grown rather than forged. Grand Strategos HFY War. The room stiffened. Idris' voice remained clinical. 43 confirmed planetary campaigns. 0 recorded defeats. Vale's gaze did not waver. He's never fought us. On the opposite side of the solar system, aboard the Dominion flagship Eternal Mandate, Grand Strategos HFY War observed a very different projection. A small yellow star. A scattering of planets. A minor system at the edge of nothing important. Assessment, Vor said. The translator lattice embedded along the command deck converted the Dominion's layered harmonic language into crisp machine-rendered standard. The intelligence overseer responded without emotion. Third planet hosts dominant industrial species. Carbon-based. Estimated population, 11 billion. A rotation of the projection revealed Earth. Blue. Fragile. Technological evaluation? Subrelativistic propulsion. Limited orbital infrastructure. No detected shielding grids. No faster-than-light capability. A faint ripple passed through the command deck, the Dominion equivalent of mild amusement. Classification? The pause. Pre-expansion civilization. In Dominion doctrine, the phrase carried a precise meaning. Not a threat. Not a rival. Not even a challenge. A resource. Vor regarded the planet for several silent seconds. Time to the inner system? At current velocity, primary worlds within 7 standard cycles. 7 days. Efficient. Routine. Proceed with a standard approach, Vor said. No tension. No doubt. Deploy forward observers. Initiate compliance protocols upon entry to inhabited zones. The officers acknowledged. The fleet maintained its flawless inward glide. Absolute confidence radiated through every layer of command. Another system. Another species. Another inevitability. Back in Geneva, Vale watched the same red formation inch closer. The solar system looked serene in holographic light. Elegant orbits. Silent worlds. Invisible weapons waking in the dark. Vale allowed himself the smallest, coldest exhale. Begin Phase 1, he said. Commander Idris did not smile. But her eyes gleamed with something far more dangerous. Relief. Blind them. The vote took 19 seconds. No speeches. No grandstanding. No political theater. The representatives of Earth's governments watched the projection of 4,200 red contacts moving inward, and for the first time in modern history, hesitation vanished from international decision-making. Authorization granted. Full military autonomy. Protocol Aegis, all phases. Fleet Admiral Marcus Vale did not acknowledge the result. He had never truly doubted it. Some moments did not belong to debate. They belonged to survival. Global activation, he said. Across Earth, systems long buried beneath classification barriers came alive. Deep inside the asteroid belt, objects that had drifted in perfect silence for decades began to move. Their surfaces were indistinguishable from ordinary rock, cratered, lifeless, invisible against the background chaos of debris. Now, massive segmented plates slid open along seams no telescope had ever resolved. Warships emerged like ghosts being exhaled from stone. They ran cold. No bright engine flares. No obvious signatures. Just dark metal sliding into darker space. Around Jupiter, within radiation fields so violent they would shred unprotected electronics in seconds, carrier groups powered up behind electromagnetic curtains of noise. Reactors hummed. Weapons cycled. Thousands of dormant machines woke from mechanical sleep. The gas giants' storms churned, indifferent. On Mars, underground cities are sealed. Blast doors thicker than skyscrapers locked into place. Transit tunnels depressurized in controlled stages. Civil authorities initiated emergency protocols practiced for years and never believed necessary. For 2 million colonists, truth arrived not as rumor, but as command transmission. An alien fleet was coming. There would be no evacuation. There would be no running. There would only be endurance. In the outer system, stretching across volumes of space so vast they defied human intuition, the outer defense network awakened. Thousands of platforms no larger than civilian vehicles drifted in perfect invisibility. Their hulls were coated in layered absorption composites that swallowed radiation, heat, reflection. They had no bright engines. No active emissions. No presence detectable by any known scanning doctrine. They had been sleeping for decades. Waiting. Now, blue markers bloomed across Commander Aisha Rahman's display aboard Sentinel Array 9. She had always known they were there, Every array commander did. But knowing something abstractly and watching it ignite into coordinated purpose were entirely different experiences. The darkness of deep space filled with silent intent. Lieutenant Shin stared at the expanding web. It's like, he struggled for words. Like the system just woke up. Aisha did not answer. She was watching the red contacts. Still moving. Still perfect. Still unaware. They can't see any of it, Morales whispered. Aisha's voice was quiet, steady, edged with something colder than fear. That's the point. Back aboard the Eternal Mandate, Dominion forward observers continued their scans. Sensor arrays pulsed outward in disciplined cycles, mapping radiation gradients, gravitational drift, particulate density. The data flowed in clean, unremarkable streams. Empty space. Background noise. Nothing of consequence. Probe units detached from the fleet. Small, fast, expendable machines designed to map the approach corridor. They accelerated ahead of the Armada in precise geometric spreads, their sensor lattices drinking in data from the darkness. Probe 17 transmitted. Normal. Probe 21 transmitted. Normal. Probe 33 transmitted. Silence. The loss barely registered. Probes failed. Space was hostile. Debris, microfractures, statistical inevitabilities. Replacement units launched automatically. Probe 42 transmitted. Normal. Probe 51 transmitted. Silence. The sensor overseer frowned. Loss clusters were not unusual. Patterns were. Within the hour, 9 probes had vanished. All within the same broad region of space. Deep scan, Vor ordered. The arrays intensified. Higher resolution. Greater sensitivity. The results returned clean. No mines. No vessels. No anomalies. Just cold, empty, dark. Curious, one officer murmured. Vor studied the projection. His expression did not change, but a microscopic shift in posture rippled through the command deck. Something was interfering. Something invisible. Increase probe density, he said. Maintain advance. In Geneva, Commander Idris watched confirmation streams cascade down her display. Probe neutralization rate, 93%. Outer defense network performance, optimal. Enemy formation integrity, unchanged. They still think it's noise, an analyst said. Marcus Vale's gaze remained fixed on the projection. They don't think it's anything. Idris nodded. That, more than any weapon, was humanity's greatest advantage. The Dominion had conquered civilizations that fought like everyone else. Energy against energy. Light against light. Predictable doctrines inside predictable frameworks. Humanity did not fight like the galaxy. Humanity fought like something that had spent 80 years expecting extinction. Far beyond Uranus, Dominion probe losses accelerated. One by one. Then in clusters. Then in waves. Armored observers deployed. They lasted slightly longer. Then vanished too. No debris fields. No detectable weapons signatures. Just machines going dark inside space that insisted it was empty. For the first time since entering the system, Grand Strategos Kale Vor felt it. Not fear. Not yet. But something colder. A whisper of uncertainty. In Sentinel Array 9's operations deck, Aisha Rahman watched the red formation glide deeper into the web of hidden blue. They're still coming, Chin said. Yes, Aisha replied. Her eyes never left the screen. They always do. By the third day, the Dominion had lost 47 probes. The number hovered at the edge of statistical impossibility. Failures occurred. Mechanical faults accumulated. Space was chaos wrapped in vacuum. But not like this. Not in structured clusters. Not forming a geometric absence across a region the fleet was about to traverse. On the Eternal Mandate, sensor officers worked without pause, their multi-layered displays saturated with analysis overlays. Loss mapping complete, the overseer said. A translucent sphere appeared around the fleet's projected path. Every vanished probe. Every dead observer. Every silent communication buoy. Arranged not in randomness, but in shape. Vor regarded the sphere for a long moment. deliberate. It was not a question. Yes, strategos. Detection? Negative. No emissions. No vessel signatures. No minefield indicators. The words carried something new now. Dominion doctrine had encountered stealth before. Concealment. Camouflage. Hidden weapons. But invisibility on this scale, across this volume, operating without leaving a measurable trace. That was not standard warfare. That was design. Continue to advance, Vor said. The command deck still. A junior officer hesitated. Strategos, if this is a defensive screen, then it will reveal itself. The response was calm. Absolute. The Dominion does not alter trajectory for unseen irritations. The fleet moved forward. Perfect formation. Perfect discipline. Into blindness. Across millions of kilometers, the outer defense network responded. Human platforms drifted in frozen silence, each unit an autonomous hunter. They did not radiate. They did not broadcast. Communication passed through needle-thin laser links so narrow that detection required impossible coincidence. Dominion probes entered their volume. Microwave emitters pulsed. Electronics died instantly. No explosions. No debris. No visible attack. Machines simply stopped thinking. On Sentinel Array 9, Commander Ramon watched the data feed. Probe neutralizations climbed in steady increments. Chin leaned forward. Their increasing deployment density. Yes. Trying to brute force detection. Aisha nodded faintly. It won't help them. Why not? Because they're looking for things that behave like ships. The Dominion probes died. One by one. Then in clusters. Then in expanding waves as the fleet pushed deeper into the invisible lattice. Communication buoys began to fail next. Small relay nodes trailing the Armada. The nervous system linking the fleet back to Dominion space. Buoy 12 went silent. Buoy 16 followed. Then 4 more in rapid succession. The sensor overseer's voice tightened. We are losing rear communication links. Cause? Unknown. Signal interference? No detectable source. Vor's black eyes shifted to the projection. Behind the fleet, space darkened. Not visually. Informationally. The Dominion's awareness was being peeled away layer by layer. Forward probes vanished. Rear buoys died. The Armada moved through a corridor that erased perception. For the first time, Vor altered internal alert status. Full sensor saturation. Energy cascaded through Dominion arrays. Greater power. Greater resolution. Greater reach. The darkness answered with nothing. In Geneva, Commander Idris studied incoming reports. Outer defense network performance holding at 94% efficiency. Marcus Vale did not look away from the projection. They still don't see the platforms? No, Admiral. Do they understand they're under attack? Idris paused. A faint, dangerous smile touched the corner of her mouth. They understand something is wrong. Beyond Uranus, Dominion probe losses crossed 70. Then 80. Then 100. Armored units. Redundant systems. Shielded observers. All dying inside space that insisted it was empty. On the Eternal Mandate, tension spread through the command deck like a pressure gradient. Dominion officers were not accustomed to uncertainty. Their empire had fought wars measured in inevitabilities. Superior energy systems. Superior shielding. Superior doctrine refined across centuries. Enemies were seen. Enemies were engaged. Enemies were erased. This was erosion without contact. Strategos, the sensor overseer said carefully. I can no longer classify these losses as mechanical or environmental. Vor remained motionless. Assessment. External hostile action. From what? The pause. The smallest hesitation. Unknown. Silence thickened. Vor stared at the sphere of vanished assets. Space ahead. Space behind. Empty. 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 And yet his fleet was going blind. Increase probe density again, he said. And maintain advance velocity. Strategos. Vor's gaze shifted. The temperature of the room seemed to drop. Preparation without presence is still a weakness. The officers obeyed. Because Dominion officers always obeyed. But across the command deck, something unspoken had taken root. The humans, this pre-expansion species, were not behaving like prey. They were behaving like something else entirely. Something patient. Something invisible. Something that did not need to be seen to kill. On Sentinel Array 9, Aisha Rahman watched the red formation glide deeper into the blue web. "They're blind now," Chin said quietly. Aisha's voice was steady. "No." Her eyes never left the screen. "We've only taken their eyes." She paused. The red contacts advanced. Still perfect. Still confident. Still moving exactly where humanity needed them to go. "Next," she said softly, "we start taking their blood." The first Dominion warship died without ceremony. It happened at the rear of the formation, where nothing significant had occurred in CR's previous 43 campaigns. Rear positions were safe by doctrine. Protected by layers of overlapping defense grids and statistical probability. No enemy ever struck the tail first. Which was why nobody saw it coming. The cruiser unyielding purpose vanished from the tactical display in less than a second. No warning flare. No shield collapse signature. No weapons lock alert. One moment it was there, running in flawless alignment with its neighboring vessels. The next moment it was not. On the eternal mandate, sensor stations flickered. Contact lost. Cause? Unknown. Before analysis could propagate, another red marker blinked out. Then another. 3 ships went inside 12 seconds. Now alarms rippled across the command deck. Multiple vessel losses. Damage reports unavailable. Scanning for hostile emissions, negative. Vor turned toward the projection. Space behind the fleet bloomed with expanding clouds of debris and ionized gas. Visual confirmation, an officer whispered. "Ships destroyed." How? The answer arrived in fragmented telemetry. Kinetic impact. The phrase fell into the chamber like something obscene. Dominion warfare did not fear kinetic events. Micrometeoroids. Debris strikes. Random collisions. Their shields handled such trivialities effortlessly. But these impacts, these were not random. They were precise. Each destroyed vessel exhibited identical destruction patterns. Hull penetration. Internal catastrophic failure. Reactor breach. Ships were not being damaged. They were being deleted. Source. Vor demanded. "I cannot identify one, Strategos. There are no detectable projectiles. No weapon signatures. No launch vectors. The Dominion point defense systems activated automatically. Thousands of targeting arrays scanned the darkness for threats. They found millions of objects. Debris. Microscopic fragments of ordinary space. Nothing distinguishable from anything else. Nothing that looked like a weapon. Another ship vanished. This time closer to the core. Then 5 more in rapid sequence along the lower rear arc. The formation shuddered. For the first time since entering the system, Dominion vessels broke alignment. Not from command. From instinct. "Strategos, we are under attack." The words were unnecessary. Vor raised one of his forearms. Silence slammed down across the deck. "All ships." His voice was iron. "Titan formation." 4,000 vessels responded instantly. The Armada compressed inward, overlapping shields, sensors, and defensive grids into a dense sphere of layered protection. Full sensor saturation. Energy cascaded outward. Point defense systems, fire at will on all high-velocity objects. Targeting arrays locked onto thousands of moving specks. They fired. Beams of coherent energy lanced through darkness. Nothing happened. Because the weapons were already past them. Human torpedo swarms drifted through space like dead metal. No engines. No emissions. No heat. No signature. They had been falling for years along trajectories calculated with patient, terrifying precision. Now they intersected the Dominion fleet. Relative velocities turned inert tungsten into extinction events. The destroyer's steadfast dominion was pierced cleanly through its midsection. Shaped charges detonated microseconds later. The vessel became light. Then debris. Across the formation, ships began to die in accelerating clusters. Each impact is invisible until the instant of contact. Each strike is indistinguishable from meaningless background matter. Dominion sensors screamed with data they could not interpret. Everything looks like debris. I cannot isolate threat profiles. They are everywhere. Vor watched red markers vanish in waves. 31 ships are gone. Then 44. Then dozens more as the swarm volumes fully converged. Dominion point defense systems continued firing into emptiness, targeting objects too small, too cold, too numerous to categorize as hostile. They were designed to stop missiles. They were designed to stop fighters. They were designed to stop things that behaved like weapons. Human weapons did not behave. They simply arrived. By the end of the first assault window, 172 Dominion warships had ceased to exist. Not crippled. Not damaged. Erased. Silence gripped the eternal mandate. No confusion now. Dominion officers stared at their displays as though reality itself had malfunctioned. Vor stood unmoving at the center of the storm. Inside, something old and unfamiliar stirred. Not fear, but recognition. The species, this primitive classification, was fighting like something that understood predators intimately. All ships, Vor said calmly. The calm was worse than anger. These are automated preposition defenses. No one spoke. The enemy lacks courage for open engagement. Another cluster of ships died. We will increase velocity. Another cluster died. We will push through. Because Dominion doctrine did not retreat from machines. Because empires built on inevitability could not psychologically process ambush as superiority. Because Vor had never lost. The fleet accelerated. Swarms continued to claim vessels, but losses thinned as velocity disrupted some intercept geometries. Not all. Never all. 18 hours later, as the Armada pushed past Uranus, Dominion losses stabilized. 193 ships destroyed. Nearly 5% of the invasion force. Without ever seeing the enemy. Without ever firing upon a visible attacker. Without understanding how they were being killed. In Geneva, Commander Idris reviewed the after-action streams. Phase 2 performance within projected parameters. Marcus Vale's gaze remained fixed on the projection. Red markers diminished. But still overwhelming. They adapted faster than simulations predicted. Yes, Admiral. But they still came deeper. Vale nodded slowly. That was the only metric that mattered. Across the holographic solar system, thousands of red contacts advanced inward with wounded fury. Behind them, debris drifted in silent testimony. Ahead of them, nothing. Nothing visible. Nothing detectable. Nothing that resembled the trap that had been waiting for them for 80 years. On Sentinel Array 9, Aisha Rahman watched the fleet glide toward Jupiter. Chin spoke softly. We hurt them. Aisha's eyes did not leave the screen. Yes. The red formation tightened. Faster. Sharper. Angrier. But now, she said quietly, they start fighting back. Admiral Lena Qureshi had been living inside a dead moon for 2 years. From the outside, Callisto looked exactly like what it was, an ancient, cratered sphere of ice and rock circling Jupiter in silent obedience. No lights. No emissions. No sign that anything inside it was alive. Which was precisely why it was perfect. Deep beneath kilometers of frozen crust, humanity had carved out one of the most heavily armed naval bastions ever constructed. Docking caverns large enough to swallow capital ships. Reactor chambers humming with contained suns. Drone vaults stacked in endless geometric rows. A city of war hidden inside geological indifference. Qureshi stood in the command center of the UNS Resolute. She was tall, broad-shouldered, her dark hair threaded with premature silver earned not from age but from responsibility. Those who served under her described her leadership with remarkable consistency. Relentless. Unimpressed by impossible odds. Right now, Impossible odds were approaching at high velocity. Final confirmation, she said. The tactical sphere rotated before her. 3,900 Dominion warships. Even after the swarm losses, the invasion force remained vast beyond comfortable comprehension. Commander Ilias responded from the sensor pit. Enemy fleet entering Jovian space. Formation tighter than initial projections. Increased sensor saturation. They learned, Qureshi murmured. Yes, Admiral. Good. There was no bravado in the word. Only professional respect. Because underestimating an enemy was how species died. On the Eternal Mandate, Grand Strategos Kale Vor observed Jupiter for the first time. The gas giant filled the forward projection, a colossal storm-racked world of churning clouds and violent radiation. Lightning storms larger than continents. Magnetic fields vast and savage. Even Dominion sensors struggled here. Radiation interference is severe, the Overseer reported. Sensor clarity reduced across multiple bands. Vor studied the planetary system. Multiple moons. Complex gravitational interactions. Electromagnetic noise saturating detection arrays. A tactically inconvenient environment, which meant the humans chose this ground deliberately, Vor said. Yes, strategos. Probability of concealed assets? Increased. Alternate trajectory? The pause. Available. CR considered. Standard Dominion doctrine favored efficiency. Avoid unnecessary engagements. Strike directly at primary worlds. Leave distractions behind. But this species, this infuriating invisible species, had already demonstrated unacceptable deviation from expected prey behavior. Leaving enemy forces at the rear was strategically unsound. No. His voice was absolute. We clear this region. All ships, combat formation. Inside Callisto, Qureshi watched the Red Fleet glide into the storm. They took the bait, Ilias said. Qureshi's eyes remained fixed. They made the correct decision. Which is worse for them? Much worse. She turned toward the command deck. All units. No speech. No theatrics. Just a single word. Deploy. Callisto opened. Massive armored plates slid apart along seams hidden beneath centuries of impact scars. Warships emerged. Hundreds of vessels sliding into Jupiter's radiation-drenched darkness like predators leaving a den. They scattered instantly. Some diving into radiation belts where electromagnetic chaos masked their emissions. Others slipped behind moons. Others are running cold. Invisible among storms of charged particles. Dominion sensors pulsed outward. They saw noise, static, radiation storms. Nothing resembling a fleet. Then the first dreadnought died. It happened so fast that Dominion defense systems never fully engaged. A tungsten rod traveling at a significant fraction of light speed tore through the vessel's forward shields. The shields flared brilliantly, then failed conceptually, because they were built to stop energy. Not matter carrying extinction-level kinetic force. The rod punched through layered armor like it was mist. Structural supports shattered. The reactor breached. The dreadnought broke apart from the inside in a silent, blinding flash. On the Eternal Mandate, alarms detonated. The capital ship was destroyed. Source. I cannot detect projectile origins. Another dreadnought vanished. Then 2 more. Then 5. Invisible impacts collapsing vessels across the forward screen. Return fire. Vor commanded. Dominion energy batteries roared to life. Thousands of plasma lances and particle beams tore into the darkness around Jupiter's moons. Callisto's surface erupted. Ganymede's ice plains vaporized. Europa's crust detonated into expanding clouds. Some shots found targets. A human cruiser darting between radiation bands was caught mid-burn. It disappeared in incandescent ruin. But human ships did not linger. They struck. Vanished. Struck again from impossible vectors. Wolves in a storm. Kinetic doctrine confirmed, the Dominion Overseer said. Vor's black eyes narrowed. Dominion shields rotated frequencies. Amplified energy dispersion matrices. None of it mattered. Because physics did not negotiate with doctrine. Another cluster of ships died. Then another. Then entire segments of formation collapsed under impacts too fast to track. They are using the moons as cover. Predictive targeting failing. They are not holding engagement lines. Of course they weren't. Human warfare did not resemble Dominion warfare. Humanity did not fight like an empire. Humanity fought like something born inside extinction pressure. Flexible, adaptive, unstable, dangerous. Release swarms, Qureshi ordered. Drone carriers opened. Thousands of unmanned combat units poured into darkness like clouds of metal insects. Dominion point defense systems ignited instantly. Beams of coherent light shredded hundreds of drones in seconds. But the swarm did not behave like pilots. It behaved like mathematics. Units shifted trajectories in real time, flowing around defensive fire, identifying weak shield zones, damaged vessels, gaps. The swarm poured through those gaps like water through fractures. Dominion ships began to die differently now. Engines crippled. Sensor arrays destroyed. Shield generators punctured. Kinetic lances finished what drones began. For 6 brutal hours, Jovian space became a machine of destruction. Radiation belts crackled with weapons fire. Moons scarred. Debris fields bloomed. Dominion discipline held, barely. Vor adapted with terrifying speed. Titan sphere formation. Overlap defensive grids. Concentrate firepower. The fleet compressed into a dense, armored storm of shields and weapons. Drone penetration rates dropped. Kinetic kill efficiency decreased. Human losses climbed. 4 carriers died in coordinated Dominion strikes. 32 human ships followed. Qureshi watched the casualty streams with a face carved from stone. Victory was never free. By the 12th hour, the engagement broke. Dominion losses exceeded 1,000 vessels. Human losses approached 60. Neither side possessed strength for immediate continuation. Vor made the decision no Dominion commander had ever made lightly. Tactical withdrawal. Not retreat. Never retreat. Repositioning. Regrouping. Recalculating. 3,000 Dominion warships pulled away from Jupiter. Wounded. Angry. Still overwhelmingly dangerous. Inside the Resolute, silence gripped the command deck. Ilias exhaled shakily. We hurt them. Qureshi stared at the diminishing red markers. Yes. Over 1,000 Dominion ships were destroyed. An impossible number against an empire that had never known defeat. But her voice carried no triumph. Helm. Yes, Admiral? Set pursuit vector. The officers turned. Ma'am? Qureshi's eyes remained fixed on the fleeing Armada. They're not regrouping. The Red Fleet's trajectory lines burned across the display. Direct. Unwavering. Toward Mars. Toward Earth. They're angry. A dangerous silence filled the chamber. Which means, she said quietly, they're going straight for our civilians. Governor Samira Hadid had never planned to command a world under siege. She had come to Mars 23 years earlier as a structural systems engineer, part of the generation that believed the red planet represented humanity's boldest act of creation rather than its final refuge. She designed pressure domes, thermal grids, and life support redundancies. She built habitats meant for children, for families, for long and uneventful lives beneath artificial skies. Leadership had arrived later, reluctantly, pulled from her by trust rather than ambition. Now trust stood on the edge of extinction. How long? She asked. Colonel Arjun Mehta, commander of the Martian defense garrison, did not soften the answer. 19 hours to orbital contact. The number settled into the command center like a physical weight. On the central projection, red vectors cut across space. 3,000 Dominion warships. Even after Jupiter. Even after 1,000 losses. Still an armada capable of burning planets. Samira stared at the display. 2 million civilians. 6 underground cities. No evacuation routes. No escape trajectories. The mathematics was obscene. The Helios array, she said quietly. It was not a question. Mehta nodded once. Solar Command has authorized full activation. For a moment, Samira closed her eyes. The Helios Array was humanity's most terrible secret. Buried beneath Olympus Mons, threaded through geological vaults carved into ancient volcanic rock, lay the largest directed energy weapons humanity had ever constructed. Massive gamma radiation focusing arrays powered by antimatter reactors accumulated grain by painstaking grain over half a century. By mass, the stockpile was laughably small. By energy, it was an apocalypse contained. Each firing cycle converted a fraction of antimatter into beams of coherent gamma radiation capable of overwhelming any known shielding doctrine. Nothing survived the Helios fire. Not ships. Not stations. Not certainty. But the weapon had a cost. Every discharge consumed staggering power. Every shot drained the grid-sustaining Martian life. For minutes at a time, cities would go dark. Air recyclers would stall. Thermal regulators would falter. On a planet where surface temperatures could kill in seconds, even underground stability was fragile. How long between shots? Samir asked. Approximately 7 minutes for primary recharge. 7 minutes. In sealed tunnels. With thinning air. With falling heat. Meta's voice remained clinical. We will cycle life support priority across cities. No single settlement should experience full systemic collapse. The word echoed dangerously. Samira opened her eyes. We can survive darkness. She looked at the red vectors. We cannot survive them. 5 minutes later, her voice filled Mars. This is Governor Hadid. Across tunnels, shelters, schools, medical wards, families froze mid-motion. An enemy fleet is approaching our world. No panic language. No euphemism. Only the truth. We are not defenseless. In shelters, hands tightened. Children looked upward at speakers embedded in steel. Defensive systems will activate. When they fire, you will feel it. Samira's voice softened but did not waver. The lights will dim. The air may feel thin. Temperatures may fluctuate. In Olympus City, a child clutched her mother's arm. It will be frightening. Across Mars, silence deepened. I am asking you to trust that the systems will stabilize. The pause. I am asking you to take care of one another in the dark minutes. Another pause. We built homes from stone and dust. We endured isolation, scarcity, distance. Her voice carried something older now. Identity. We endure this. 16 hours later, Dominion vessels entered Martian space. Grand Strategos Kaelvor had used the transit time well. Formation reorganized. Damaged ships redistributed. Shield matrices recalibrated. Sensor arrays amplified. He had studied Jupiter. He had studied human tactics. He had learned. Standard siege formation unfolded across the projection. Layered advanced screen. Heavy capital vessels behind. Overlapping defensive grids. Dominion discipline restored. They will reveal their planetary defenses, Vor said calmly. Absorb initial volley. Identify emission vectors. Neutralize. Routine. Predictable. Dominion doctrine eternal. The first Helios shot erased a dreadnought. There was no projectile. No visible beam. Just a vessel sailing in flawless alignment. Then absence. Gamma radiation struck with energy densities that made shielding meaningless. The ship did not explode. It ceased. Matter converted to plasma faster than structural collapse could propagate. 2 escorts caught along the beam's edge died moments later. On the Eternal Mandate, alarms detonated. Directed energy weapon. Spectrum analysis, gamma. Vor's eyes widened microscopically. Gamma. Only antimatter reactors produced such output. Impossible for a pre-expansion species. They have antimatter, he said quietly. The command deck still. Dominion doctrine recalculated reality. 7 minutes later, another dreadnought vanished. Then another. Each Helios discharge carving surgical wounds through the Dominion screen. But Vor adapted instantly. Maximum acceleration. 3,000 warships surged forward. Close distance. Deny firing solutions. Trade ships for kilometers. Because Dominion commanders did not freeze. They calculated. On Mars, the lights died. Olympus City vanished into absolute darkness. Air recyclers fell silent. Thermal grids faltered. 200,000 civilians inhaled sharply as the mechanical heartbeat of survival stopped. The cold arrived immediately. Samira stood inside the emergency lighting glow, watching the clock. 1 minute. 3. Breath fogged in the air. Somewhere beyond reinforced bulkheads, a child began to cry. Power restoration in 4 minutes, Meta said. For minutes. An eternity measured in human fear. The lights returned. The air hummed. Relief rippled. 3 minutes later, Helios fired again. Darkness swallowed Mars once more. Fire. Darkness. Fire. Darkness. The rhythm became psychological torture. Parents wrapped children in blankets. Medical teams stabilized panic responses. Engineers monitored atmospheric drift. 2 million civilians endured extinction cycles measured in minutes. Above them, the sky burned. Dominion ships died. But Dominion ships advanced. Vor drove his fleet through recharge gaps with ruthless precision. Losses mounted. But distance collapsed. Kilometer by kilometer. Shot by shot. Because desperation warfare was still warfare. And Mars was running out of space. Admiral Lena Qureshi's fleet arrived at Mars in pieces. 87 vessels where once there had been hundreds. Hulls scarred black from Jovian combat. Shield matrices unstable. Weapon banks depleted. Crews exhausted beyond anything training simulations had ever adequately modeled. But they were alive. And Mars was still there. Status, Qureshi said. Dominion fleet within the inner engagement envelope, Commander Ilias replied. The projection told the story brutally. Helios array cycling. Dominion losses accumulating. Dominion advances relentlessly. They're pushing between recharge windows, Ilias said. Yes. They'll reach low orbital positions within the hour. Qureshi nodded once. Standard Dominion calculus. Spend ships at close distance. Deny firing geometry. Turn planetary weapons into liabilities. Her eyes scanned the battlespace. 3,000 Dominion warships. Human planetary defenses straining. Civilian survival margins collapsing. There would be no clean solution. There never was. Split the fleet. Silence rippled across the bridge. Ilias looked up slowly. Ma'am? 60 ships under Captain Navarro. His throat tightened. Distraction vector? Yes. And you? Qureshi's voice was calm. Absolute. Core penetration. Navarro did not hesitate, because human officers chosen for deep command never did. Understood. 60 battered warships ignited engines and surged toward the Dominion flank. Weapons blazing. Kinetic lances roaring. Drone remnants spilling into space. Dominion sensors flared. Energy batteries pivoted. Formation integrity strained. Chaos blossomed exactly where Qureshi needed it. The UNS Resolute accelerated directly into hell. 27 ships drove behind her like fragments of a collapsing star. Dominion vessels reacted instantly. Screening ships shifted. Energy weapons ignited. Space became incandescent violence. Human ships died immediately. The destroyer Karachi vanished under plasma fire. The cruiser Ardent broke apart seconds later. But momentum held. Kinetic lances fired at point-blank range. At these distances, tungsten rods barely needed acceleration. Dominion armor became theory rather than defense. Ships ruptured. Exploded. Collapsed inward. Qureshi's formation punched through the outer screen like a blade driven through flesh. On Mars, Colonel Meta's eyes widened. Governor. Samira stared at the projection. A wound. A narrow, unstable fracture splitting the Dominion formation. A corridor carved from sacrifice. Qureshi's voice cut across the command channel. Hadid, firing solution available. Primary array. Bearing 268. Elevation 11. Meta's hands moved instantly across the controls. Targeting systems recalculated. For the first time in hours. A clear shot. Samira did not hesitate. Fire. Helios Array 1 discharged at maximum yield. Gamma radiation tore through the corridor into the densest concentration of Dominion capital ships. The effect was catastrophic. 23 warships vanished instantly. 14 more disintegrated along beam edges. The Dominion core ruptured. Formation geometry collapsed. Shockwaves of debris cascaded outward. On the Resolute's shattered bridge, alarms screamed. Dominion retaliation was instantaneous. Energy weapons at this range did not miss. One escort after another died around Qureshi. Explosions bloomed like violent stars. Her flagship shuddered violently. Hull breaches cascading. Shield grids gone. But the corridor remained open. Because enough humans had already died to buy its existence. On the Eternal Mandate, Kale Vor watched the projection fracture. Dominion ships vanishing in impossible clusters. Command cohesion collapsing. For the first time in his long career, the mathematics turned hostile. Strategos, the overseer whispered. We are losing structural integrity across the formation. Ver did not answer. He was staring at a single human marker burning inside the storm. The UNS Resolute. Qureshi's dying flagship. Still firing. Still killing. Still advancing despite physics, despite probability, despite survival logic. Dominion vessels converged. A dreadnought aligned its primary weapon. Plasma fire consumed the Resolute in blinding annihilation. Admiral Lena Qureshi ceased to exist. But the corridor could not be closed. Helios arrays continued firing. Shot after shot carving deeper into Dominion collapse. Navarro's surviving ships tore through destabilized flanks. Dominion discipline shattered entirely. The battle became slaughter mathematics. 11 hours after first Martian contact. It ended. Mars floated inside a graveyard. 2,800 Dominion warships destroyed. Human fleet reduced to wreckage. Helios arrays silent. Planetary grid stabilizing. In Olympus City, the lights returned. And stayed. Samira Hadid stared at the projection. Red markers dwindling. 400 Dominion vessels. From an armada of thousands. Colonel Meta exhaled slowly. They're retreating. Samira's eyes narrowed. No. She pointed at converging vectors. Blue markers rising from darkness across the system. They're trying to. Grand Strategos Kale Vor had never ordered a full retreat. Dominion commanders did not retreat. They repositioned. They recalculated. They adjusted strategic posture in accordance with evolving battlefield conditions. But mathematics did not respect doctrine. All surviving vessels, Vor said. His voice was calm because it had to be. Maximum acceleration. Exit trajectory. 400 Dominion warships responded. Engines ignited. Formation dissolved into survival vectors. Behind them, Mars burned cold and silent. Ahead of them, the long dark corridor to open space. To faster-than-light engagement distance. To escape. The Eternal Mandate shuddered violently. Damage reports cascaded across failing systems. Entire sections of the flagship were gone. Shield generators destroyed. Weapon banks crippled. Casualty metrics climbing beyond relevance. But it was still alive. Barely. Strategos, the sensor overseer said. There is a transmission. Vor's black eyes narrowed. Source. Human. Content. The pause. Then a voice filled the bridge. Measured. Cold. Absolute. This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Vale of United Solar Command. Silence swallowed the chamber. You entered our system. The pause. You will not leave it. The transmission ended. No threat rhetoric. No emotional flourish. Just certainty. Talons of unease tightened inside Vor's chest. Clarification, an officer whispered. Vor did not answer. Because his sensors had just updated. Hundreds of faint contacts bloomed across the display. So fast they barely registered as data before predictive systems failed entirely. High-velocity objects. Velocity, impossible. Numbers resolved. 0.31 c. 31% of light speed. Vectors converging from multiple directions. Not targeting ships. Targeting space. The volume the fleet occupied. The realization arrived with crushing clarity. Not weapons fired during retreat. Weapons fired before Mars. Before Jupiter. Before the first Dominion probe had died. They built a cage, Vor whispered. Projectiles moving at relativistic velocities could not be dodged. Could not be intercepted. Could barely be detected. Dominion point defense systems attempted targeting solutions. Failed instantly. No tracking coherence. No reaction windows. No survival mathematics. All ships, Vor commanded. Maximum dispersal. 400 warships scattered violently. Because clustering meant extinction. Because spacing meant only probable extinction. Because choice no longer existed. The first kill vehicle struck a destroyer. At 90,000 kilometers per second, tungsten ceased to behave like matter. Impact energies exceeded design imagination. The vessel did not explode. It atomized. Plasma bloom expanded outward, shredding nearby ships with debris traveling at catastrophic velocities. Then the second vehicle hit. Then the third. Then dozens. Streaks of light flashing across darkness for fractions of seconds before reality tore itself apart again and again and again. Dominion ships vanished in waves. Red markers collapsing too quickly for tactical systems to update coherently. The fleet dissolved into chaos. Engines firing blindly. Shields flaring uselessly. Space itself becomes a weapon. The Eternal Mandate survived the first wave by coincidence rather than defense. Shockwaves battered the crippled hull. Systems collapsed one after another. Then a kill vehicle struck directly. The aft section disappeared. Propulsion gone. The flagship spun violently into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered. Gravity generators failed. Officers floated amid drifting debris and frozen spheres of blood. Vor gripped his command frame with 3 arms. The fourth hung broken and useless. Status, he said. His voice was still calm. Even now. Even at extinction. No propulsion. No shields. No weapons. Life support failing. How many vessels remain? Silence. Then a whisper. Fewer than 50. 50. Out of 4,200. Vor closed his eyes. Behind darkness he saw them all. Every ship. Every warrior. Every certainty. Destroyed by a species classified as primitive. Destroyed by preparation mistaken for weakness. Destroyed by an enemy that had never once behaved like prey. Open long-range channel. The communications officer hesitated only a fraction of a second. Channel open, strategos. Sir straightened. Pain rippled through shattered physiology. He ignored it. This is Grand Strategos Kael Vor of the Karen Dominion. His voice carried across dying transmitters into interstellar darkness. The invasion fleet has been destroyed. The pause. Not from hesitation. From terrible clarity. The human species possesses military capabilities exceeding Dominion projections. Another pause. They are not prey. The words felt like something sacred. Something forbidden. They were never prey. The Eternal Mandate groaned. Reactor containment failing. Time is collapsing. My final recommendation to the High Command. Vor's black eyes burned with terrible understanding. Do not come here. A final breath. We were the prey. The channel died. 3 minutes later, the Eternal Mandate vanished in silent annihilation. And the Dominion fleet ceased to exist. 6 months later, Earth was still learning how to breathe normally. The war had lasted 11 days from first detection to final extinction event. 11 days in which humanity had confronted the oldest fear in its collective memory. Not disaster, not war, but erasure. The possibility that the species itself might simply end. Cities had not burned. Oceans had not boiled. But something deeper had shifted. Humanity had seen the abyss look back. Fleet Admiral Marcus Vale stood before the United Planetary Assembly in Geneva. He looked older than he had any right to. Not physically. Existentially. The chamber was silent. Not from the ceremony. From memory. 6 months ago, Vale began. We fought for survival. No triumph language. No victory rhetoric. He spoke of losses. Of ships that never returned from Jupiter. Of Martian civilians enduring darkness cycles measured in terror. Of drone operators guiding swarms into fleets filled with living beings. Of Admiral Lena Qureshi. Of 11,000 men and women who had died without ever seeing a planetary sky again. He did not speak of glory, because survival was not glorious. It was expensive. When the Dominion fleet entered our system, Vale said quietly, "They believed we were weak." The pause. "They believed we were unprepared." Another pause. "They believed we were prey." The projection behind him shifted. Not battle footage. Not destruction. But stars. Distances. Unknown worlds. We intercepted Dominion communications after the conflict. Silence deepened. Their commander's final transmission has propagated beyond their empire. Vale's voice hardened slightly. Other species have heard what happened here. The chamber stirred faintly. On 9 confirmed worlds, subject populations have initiated resistance actions against Dominion authority. Now the silence changed. Not grief. Recognition. Scale. Humanity had not merely survived. It had altered galactic psychology. On Mars, Governor Samira Hadid lit the memorial flame atop Olympus Mons. The structure was simple, elegant. A column of white fusion fire burning inside transparent containment fields. Designed to last 1,000 years. 2 million colonists watched from below. Families gathered in communal halls. Children pressed close to projection screens. The flame ignited. A roar of sound cascaded through underground cities. Not celebration. Release. Memory given form. At the base of the monument, a single inscription. Mars remembers those who held the dark. Across Earth, shipyards expanded. New fleets were commissioned. New weapons platforms were constructed. But alongside engines and armor, other systems grew. Translation arrays. Deep space communication beacons. Long-range exploration vessels. Humanity was preparing again. Because humanity is always prepared. But preparation was no longer driven solely by fear. Now there was something else. Intention. 17 light-years away, on a world humanity did not yet know existed, a species called the Thalen listened. They were small, slight beings adapted to low gravity and dim starlight. The Dominion had conquered them 3 centuries earlier. Generations had lived and died beneath occupation so absolute that resistance had become mythology rather than strategy. In a hidden chamber carved beneath industrial infrastructure, a group gathered around a crude receiver assembled from stolen components. The signal was fragmented, translated across multiple languages, degraded by distance. But the message survived. Not as conquerors. Static. As liberators. Static. We do not stop. The Thalans stared at one another. For 300 years, Dominion doctrine had defined reality. Inevitability. Submission. Extinction of hope. Now a new story moved through the stars. An empire broken. A fleet destroyed. A predator defeated by something it had mistaken for weakness. The oldest Thalan present, her skin lined with age, her movements slow with time, leaned closer to the receiver. The final words crackled through noise. They were never prey. Silence filled the chamber. Slowly, impossibly, she smiled. On Earth, humanity began transmitting. Not threats. No warnings. But signals. Mathematical greetings. Linguistic frameworks. Invitations cast into darkness. Humanity reached outward with open hands. Though the weapons remained. Because optimism without preparation was just another extinction pathway. And humanity, above all things, I learned that lesson well.